Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav network. Check out Bleav and Astros with Mike Stanton and Bleav and Texans with Cecil Shorts. And joining me as my co-host, Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism between the two of us, our 12th year on Houston Sports Talk. Later in the show, what do we think about Sengun's 3 big season goals? What do we think about keeping VanVleet long-term? Jalen Green's work ethic, and why did the Astros show a fan favorite the door? But Stephen, I'm slightly surprised as we start with the Texans at the Dalton Schultz hate this week. Didn't see that coming at all.
Is this a weekly carousel, Robert, that we take turns taking pot shots at different Texans? Last week it was Bobby Slowick. This week it's Dalton Schultz. Who's it going to be next week? I mean, why don't we just go around the entire roster? Well, we only have 17 games in the regular season, so I guess you can't. You'd have to pick more than one per week.
Yeah, they're just lining up to take shots. I mean, you would think the Texans had won one game so far.
They're 1-5, right?
Yeah, they're 1-5.
One loss and 5 wins. Yeah.
Looking at a first pick in the draft. Quarterback stinks. You know, the whole. Yeah, the Dalton Schultz thing just kind of shocking to me. And I said in the post game that I thought the guy had his finger on that touchdown that bobbled from Schultz, and
right.
Tom agreed with me. And it was so hard to tell. There wasn't an angle. I've looked at the replay 100 times. If you look at my Twitter, I do a frame by frame where you can see his hand is there. You can't tell if his hand touched the ball when Schultz's did, but if it touched at the exact same time when he's shooting to punch the ball out with his motion, then everybody's like, well, you're supposed to make those tough catches. Well, yeah, you do that. You go try to catch a ball when somebody is punching it out of your hands at the same time.
Well, I mean, yeah, they get paid to make those tough catches, and in most situations, you expect pro athletes to make the tough catches. I mean, I think in this particular instance, it's too hard to tell to give him that much of a hard time. I think where a lot of the frustration is coming from, Robert, is that I don't think Dalton Schultz is making the kind of catches that he was making last year. He made some really big catches last season. We got used to that. This year, not so much. And that one, yeah, it's probably one he could have had. But again, it's just too hard to tell. So on that particular play, I'm not sure you can get frustrated with him about that. I think you can have some concern, though. And yeah, I know the Texans have more weapons. But then again, when you do get targets to your tight end like Dalton Schultz, the veteran that he is, you do kind of expect him to make those kind of catches because he did a lot of that last year.
Yeah, I don't think he just forgot how to catch the ball. There hasn't been a load of drops despite what people said.
No.
I said, maybe he should have got the other hand out on the one pass that CJ Stroud threw where he gets one hand on the ball when he tries to reach out with his one hand. But still, he's got to assume when he turns around that he's going to have to throw 2 hands and dive for the ball. It's like there's real nitpicking here that it's not a situation of a Corey Bradford, old school Texan reference right there, but it's not a Corey Bradford situation right now.
You know what? If he had made that catch, it would have been miraculous. Everybody would be talking about, wow, that was a great play. I mean, what a tough catch it was to make. But because he didn't make it, it makes him look bad. And I don't think he's even getting the same number of targets this year that he was last year. And then again, as I said, you got a lot more weapons to spread the wealth around.
All right, let's move to some other Texan news. And it sucks enough to lose Texans players with injuries, but the drug suspensions, even more frustrating. They lost Denico Autry for 6 weeks. I was so excited Sunday thinking about getting him back, but then the news came down about Mario Edwards' drug suspension. Here's the thing, Stephen. This suspension was not for what they would call classic performance-enhancing drugs, or for what most people would call, besides amphetamines, which is the only one on this list of the class that we're talking about. But, amphetamines, Adderall, it's a drug enhancer. And I guess you can say, Stephen, kind of curious, he might have had one of his better games right before the suspension. Who knows?
The NFL has been doing drug testing and PED testing for a number of years now, long enough to where these guys, I'm not saying they should know every single drug that's on the list that you shouldn't take, but what you should do is do due diligence in, if it's something like cough medicine or, where some have been suspended for that, it's your responsibility to do your research when you know exactly what's in these. I don't care if you get it from somebody you trust. Now, if it's a case of you just think you're trying to get away with it, look, you hurt your team when you do this. And now, thank goodness. I mean, I guess the blessing is he didn't get caught the same time as Denico Autry did, or you'd have both those guys out. And the Texans are already thin enough. So it just frustrates me when these guys do this, knowing that they're going to get tested at some point. It's random. You don't know when it's going to happen, but assume that it will. Now that, Autry's coming back, you could have had a great tandem with those two, but now you're going to be out another one. So it's just frustrating to me. That's all I can say.
Yeah, a couple of things on the list, like, I don't know, synthetic marijuana, which I don't know how that helps a player. It's on the list. MDMA, which is legal in some states right now, and frankly, I think should be legal because it's helpful for PTSD and other things. Football players obviously deal with some difficult stuff in their life, and so so who knows what it is, but yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating because we haven't seen a ton of suspensions, really since maybe the Brian Cushing day. I don't remember who they had suspended prior to this season that was of any consequence to you.
No, I was trying to think back too. And I mean, Brian Cushing's the biggest name that comes up anytime recently. But, now you've got two guys on the defense in the same season that are being suspended 6 games apart. So, and the Texans defense, you already have problems in the secondary. So this is just not what you need, Robert.
If there was a little good timing, Kurt Hinish was activated from IR. He's another serviceable defensive tackle that's now in the mix. And Stephen, the news came out after our Sunday post game that Henry To'oTo'o was in concussion protocol, which is a huge deal considering Christian Harris still isn't ready to practice and Azeez got banged up. This was a thin linebacking core to begin with. But what really angers me about the To'oTo'o injury, Stephen, is that he was concussed on special teams. Why are they risking him on special teams with no Christian Harris and no real sign of his return?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I mean, who else could you put back there to save it? Because, that is a really big blow, especially if he's not going to be able to go this Sunday against Green Bay. I mean, I actually saw that. I think it was sometime after the game, or it might have been before I listened to the postgame with you and Tom. But, there's just another blow. So that's 2 defensive blows now. And you're going up against a Green Bay team, the best quarterback that you have faced by far this season in Jordan Love. This is just not the kind of thing you can afford. So not very smart for the Texans to put him back there. But I'm not really sure who else you could put back there to replace somebody like him.
Yeah, you just pointed out something that I was going to point out. When I look at the Packers game, the Texans desperately need this revived front three, of Hunter, Anderson, and Denico Autry to play huge, because as we record Tuesday, the back seven may face Jordan Love with no To'oTo'o, no Jimmy Ward, no Kamari Lassiter, and at best, a banged-up Azeez Al-Shire. Stephen, that's a lot of Neville Hewitt and D'Angelo Ross against one of the better quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I don't think you can put that much trust in those two guys. I mean, Neville Hewitt is great on special teams. Yeah, I have no problem with him there. He's one of the best special teams players we have. But you put him in a defensive back situation, especially on a regular basis, I'm not sure I trust that. And this is one of the reasons, Robert, and I'm just being honest here, I don't have a good feeling about this Green Bay game. I mean, I didn't have a really bad feeling about the Vikings game. I was a bit worried about it for sure. But, yeah, this definitely worries me. And you're going to be in Green Bay against, as I said, the best quarterback you've faced thus far with all these shortcomings. I'm really uneasy about how this game's going to turn out.
Texans didn't catch any breaks facing the toughest conference in the NFC, really the toughest conference in the NFL. I mean, the worst team is the Bears, and they're rolling right now. And
yeah, you got Caleb Williams while he was still trying to find himself. At least you got that break.
Now, the next thing I want to hit on is, man, how important is Joe Mixon? Here are the Texans' numbers with and without Mixon. There are 3 games with, 3 games without. They've scored 29.7 points with him, 18 points without on average. 160 yards per game with Mixon, 77.7 yards without. 5.3 yards per carry with Mixon, 3.4 yards without. He's big.
Oh, he's huge. And I guess it's obvious, but when you have a great running back, it changes everything. And you didn't even have Nico Collins in this game, and you still put up 41 points. Well, a lot of that is because of Joe Mixon. And listen, it isn't just about his running ability. This guy can catch out of the backfield as good as anybody the Texans have had in a long time, if ever. So he's not just a one-dimensional weapon here. He can run, he can catch, And it's obvious that when you take him out of the lineup, no disrespect to Cam Akers, but he's no Joe Mixon. And hey, even Damian Pierce gets into the act. He's not Damian Disappears. At least in that game, he wasn't.
Look at that.
I thought about that. I was going to use that at some point. I was going to drop that in. So if Damian Pierce can get back to some semblance of what he was in 2022, if Mixon can't go game after game after game, boy, that puts the Texans running game in a much better position than it has been.
After Will Anderson's massive game Sunday, Stephen, here's a few key numbers from him after 6 games. Anderson is number 2 in the NFL with 5.5 sacks. He's got 9 TFLs. As a comparison, he had 10 TFLs all last season. Add in 8 QB hits, 14 solo tackles, and a Pro Football Focus score of 80.7. He's on an all-pro pace, Stephen, and is number 2 on the Vegas defensive MVP board behind only J.J. White's little pesky brother. You remember that guy?
Yeah, I remember that guy. TJ is his name, I guess. Robert, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but some people raised their eyebrows when the Texans traded up to get Will Anderson and as much as they gave up for him. Well, this is why. And this is why I think you've got to start trusting Nick Caserio more with some of the way he's been drafting, because this guy has definitely come in. There's no sophomore jinx with Will Anderson Jr., just like there's no sophomore jinx with C.J. Stroud. I mean, your top 2 draft picks from last year are bringing it again this year. And Will Anderson Jr. is showing you why the Texans moved up to draft him, because they expected him to be this kind of an impact player. And man, just think if he didn't have those sacks, the game was well out of hand with him. But if he can keep this pace up, that's going to be quite an injection for a Texans defense that needs all the help it can get right now.
The one guy the Texans are missing on offense that you would love to see play, Nico. How about this? Nico Collins has played about 70% of a 6-game schedule. This is a 6-game schedule, okay? And is still leading the NFL in receiving yards.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. I saw that stat earlier today before we recorded. As much as I'd love to have Nico in the lineup, I think the Texans are being smart about being careful, just because, Robert, we know in the past what hamstring injuries can do to players. I mean, we can go down the list that if you bring it back too quickly, and there's always the chance of injuring it again once you do it once. So with Nico Collins, as much as you want him in there every game, obviously, but you're going to need him further down the road, especially if you can maintain this kind of pace, be on top of the division. You're going to need him later in the season when things really get tough and you get in the postseason. You don't want him to keep going in and out with a hamstring aggravation. So I hope that is the smart thing the Texans are doing, and that when he does come back in, that he'll be able to stay healthy the rest of the season.
Yeah, we had the king of the hamstrings and the groins, Arian Foster. I remember it.
Will Fuller. Yeah. Well, what's Will Fuller doing these days, by the way?
Yeah, that was sad. He was good, man.
He was. But that's the thing. You don't want the same thing to befall Nico Collins. You want him in there healthy.
Happy birthday to a couple of ex-Texans. Today, Steve McKinney turns 49. Connor Barwin turns 38. Oh, wow. Boy, that almost killed me right there. Yeah, we're going to hit a couple more Houston Pro Football birthdays later in the show. But quick reminder to look for our live Texans post-game shows right after every game this year. Tom Chavarie and I break it all down. Wednesday, I'm going to have a Packers Insider to preview Sunday's game. Please support our content by giving us a thumbs up, commenting, and subscribing for free on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. All right, Stephen, Rockets time. The season starts a week from tonight, and I thought it was great to hear Alperen Sengun has set 3 major goals this season. He wants to be an all-star, he wants to improve his free throw shooting, and he wants to improve his 3-point shooting. And, Stephen, I know most players just say they want to improve everything. You ask them and you get the generic, hey, yeah, everything can be better. But I love it when they put out the specifics to the public. When you say it publicly, maybe it gives you a little bit more motivation.
Well, didn't he leave one out, Robert? Doesn't he want to get that contract extension too? Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, here's the thing: is if he puts all 3 of those things together, he will get that contract extension. And actually, I think it will get done. I'm very confident. Unlike some other professional Houston athletes that we will not name at the moment, I'm pretty confident the Rockets will get that done with Sengun. And even if he just got 2 of those 3 things up a great bit this year. A much improved Sengun is a much improved Rockets team, and more importantly, will probably be a playoff Rockets team.
Yeah, in the interview, he pointed to specifics on his shot and what he had been doing wrong, and there was some consistency. And he said, that's what I have to improve, and I've been working on. So like he knew what he needed to do, which was a good sign. There was also this really interesting piece by the Chronicle's Jonathan Fagan on Jalen Green.
Yeah,
the major takeaway was Jalen's become way more serious and focused than maybe the assumption was. Starting in December last year, he began coming in at 8 a.m. every morning to do film and on-court work with 3 of the Rockets' assistants. Udoka pointed out, Stephen, that because they were asking a lot more from him than the other young Rockets, it took him longer to figure things out last year. But then you saw it all come together in March.
Yeah, and sometimes, Robert, I think some fans may take for granted, well, they make their dream of making the NBA. Why wouldn't they want to work harder from the get-go to make their game better? And, not all players are going to work hard for it. And I think, and I'm not saying Jalen Green didn't work hard in the beginning. I mean, look at what he faced, the first couple of years he was with the Rockets. They were in a rebuild mode. They didn't have the right coach. They didn't have the right system. But you get Ime Udoka in there, and he definitely turns things around. And I think it's not just the on-the-court stuff that we talk about, but the mental adjustment that's been going on with Jalen Green, the attitude, and again, it comes down to better coaching. Ime Udoka knows how to do that. But, yeah, the work ethic is definitely paid off in March. He kind of slowed down a little bit, I think, at the very end of the season, as did the Rockets team. But you can't deny what he did those last 2 months. And you just want him to carry it into this season because, listen, him and Sengun together doing that and improving year to year, I just think there's no doubt in my mind the Rockets are going to be a playoff team this year, Robert.
The Jalen stands were not happy with me for a couple of years because I was very critical of him. And, I'm still skeptical. I got to see it on the court. I love all the stuff that he's doing on the court, but it's the consistency, obviously.
Yeah, you want to see consistency.
But, hey, just because he was doing that last year doesn't mean I was wrong about what he was doing the first 2 years. I know you would see videos of 20 seconds and everybody's like, oh, see, he's in the gym. Well, you and I can put up video 20 seconds of us shooting baskets too. and I don't think it means a whole lot.
Well, you have to look at the big picture, Robert. And again, the numbers don't lie, but you also have to look at some of the other things around him. Yeah, you can't go on little clips, on Twitter or TikTok or Instagram or wherever you're looking, YouTube. You have to go with the big picture. And the big picture for Jalen Green there for a while wasn't looking very good. It's starting to look better. But, he needs to put an entire season of that if he wants to be the kind of player that the Rockets drafted him to be.
Yeah, there just can't be also hey, look, you had a great three-point shooting game, because you got to see this stuff over 10 or 20 games. Guys get hot. He got hot in March. Can he do it consistently? Can the numbers, consistently go up? And it's the defense also. Is he going to bring that defensive effort when he's having an off night? Because that's the key for me is where's the defense when things aren't going in the basket for him on a particular night? Yeah,
it's about being a two-way player. And you've had the offseason too. You've had that interruption. So now you're going to have to come back and bring it again. So it'll be interesting to see how much progress those two players make, and of course, we're also talking about Cam and Amen and Tari and those guys, but Sengun and Green are the driving forces, certainly. So where the Rockets go or where they go is where the Rockets will probably go too.
Fred VanVleet wants to stay in Houston long term. He said, quote, "I didn't come here to be a rental. I didn't come here to be a free agent again. I came here for a long-term home. I've loved my time here so far. I think I have a good understanding with management and the coaches about what the future looks like with this team," unquote. The last line, Stephen, is important because he tells me that he's already having conversations about re-signing, and he's saying he knows his role will be diminished because he's got to know that. So why not keep him if it's a reasonable, maybe MLE type deal, in that 20-something $1 million range?
Yeah, and you know what? If the money's right and if he's willing to take that lesser role, Robert, why wouldn't you want to have a guy like Fred VanVleet around, especially with guys, like Reed Shepherd and some of the other younger players? I mean, he's proven when he was here last year, he's proven that he's very good with the young guys. And how many times on this podcast a couple of years ago, Robert, did you and I talk about the fact that the Rockets desperately need on-court and off-court leadership? before Fred VanVleet came along. And this is the guy that you brought in not only to be a good playmaker, but to be a good leader. And he's done exactly that. So you know what? If he's willing to stay around for the right financial reasons and reduced minutes, why not have that depth? I mean, other teams would love to have that kind of depth with the Rockets, with VanVleet and Shepard and these other guys that we've talked about.
And you might ask, well, how can they afford him? Well, a couple of different things I'm going to point out. Jae'Sean Tate this year was making $7 million. That, I think 7. It's coming off the books.
Yeah.
Also, Jeff Green's money comes off the books. Maybe you can say, I would try to sign Jeff at a veteran minimum, because I think that's kind of where he is right now in his career, if he would be willing to stay with the Rockets, if that's possible. Now, if I were the Rockets, I would sign him to a descending contract. So, number one, his money doesn't get in the way as Tari and the Jabari extensions come into play in a couple of years. And number two, that contract is much more tradable if necessary, if it's descending.
Yeah, that's going to be the key, Robert, is, would he agree to an arrangement like that? And, a player as smart as VanVleet, if he knows he's in the right system and he knows he wants to stay put, I'm sure it's something that he can work out. I mean, he's done the free agency thing. Why does he need to do it again? And I think a lot of it's just going to depend on what the team does this year. Are they going to make a run for the playoffs? Are they going to go deep in the playoffs? So there are a lot of factors to determine, and I'm certainly not saying they're going to get something done that quickly. But the fact that he's talking about it and that we're talking about it and looking at all the angles, that's a good sign.
Last Rockets note, I want to just remind everybody that Miran Fader's new Hakeem Olajuwon biography is officially out today.
I'm grabbing it.
That's great. If you want to buy it, this is the time you can now do it. Plus, if you're in the Houston area, she's doing this book signing at Brazos Bookstore Thursday night. And in case you missed it, watch our interview with her in last week's show. I'm going to put the link on screen at the end of this show on YouTube, but it's always just type in Hakeem Olajuwon, Miran Fader, and my name, and I'm sure it'll pop up if you just want to find it that way. But not too difficult to find. Let's move to the Astros. Big news, sort of. The Astros choose not to renew Gary Pettis' contract. And before I ask you if this is a big deal, Stephen, we got to just thank him for 10 incredible years. In the last decade, he survived cancer and helped the Astros win 2 championships, get to 4 World Series, 7 league championships, and 9 playoffs. He coached through 3 managers and 3 general managers. So, this is somebody that's stood the test of time through all of this. Just huge applause for his Astro tenure.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the whole health situation he went through. I mean, he's obviously a fan favorite. And I know we can sit here and say, well, he's a third base coach. Why do you want to get rid of your third base coach? Was he the real reason the Astros didn't get past the first round of the playoffs this year? Well, and I mean, no, certainly not in and of itself. But I think sometimes it just is a situation where you need a fresh face in there. If the Astros are going to go in a different direction, and, as far as coaches are concerned, then unfortunately guys like Pettis are probably going to get the boot. Now, are they going to make changes with the hitting coaches or the pitching coaches? Well, that remains to be seen, obviously, but Pettis is the first. And so it does make you have to wonder, but yeah, definitely a fan favorite and one of my favorites. It's going to be sad not to see him with the Astros this next year. Yeah.
A couple of other things that I saw, some people panicking a little bit on Astros Twitter. They noticed, they got rid of some of their minor league coaches, a whole bunch of them that they didn't renew. Look, Dana Brown, he needs to get his own guys in there. You knew that was eventually going to happen. He was probably evaluating them the last couple of years. Dana Brown's in charge of that stuff. If you think Jim Crane's out there, you know what, I want to save $3. And no, Jim Crane has spent money when it's necessary and when he felt it's necessary. And Dana Brown, I think this is his call, just like it's his and Joe Espada's call on Gary Pettis. So you have to just trust all of that. Just a reminder also with Gary Pettis, as a player, we forget, you might have forgotten, he won 5 Gold Gloves, stole 354 bases altogether. And by the way, he's got 4 kids, and you may not know this, Stephen, that his son Kyler was on Days of Our Lives for 4 years. And Texans fans should also remember that his son Dante is a wide receiver for the Bears.
Wow, yeah, quite a family, huh? You talk about variety of personalities and endeavors. That's certainly his family. But, Robert, but this is just what happens when you have it falling off. Like the Astros, I mean, let's face it, we're used to them going to 7 straight ALCS appearances, and they didn't even get out of the first round this year. And yeah, you have Dana Brown, who's been here a couple of years, had a chance to see how some guys are. At some point, changes are just going to happen. You're not going to see a spot gone. I certainly don't think, anything major like that. But some of the people around him, I think you're going to see some new faces next year.
3 Gold Glove candidates for the Astros that came out today, Stephen.
Yeah, that's right. Alex Bregman, no surprise there. Jake Myers, who, is a good defensive center fielder. And Mauricio Dubon, last year he won a Gold Glove, a utility Gold Glove. Well, he's up for that again this year. So be interesting to see how many of these three actually come home with one. But they did make, they are the three the finalists of it. Which ones do you think have a real shot? I mean, Dubon, I think, can repeat. I definitely think Dubon can get there. Myers, maybe. I don't know. That's kind of a tough call. I would say Myers and Dubon would probably have the biggest chances. Also, a quick little cool Astros factoid. Since the Tigers won't make the World Series, it's going to be the first time since 2001 that the team that knocked the Astros out of the playoffs won't make the World Series. 8 times they've been knocked out over that span, which includes the 2004 Cardinals and the 2005 White Sox. Yeah, that's an interesting stat. And you've got, at least right now, Yankees, Dodgers, Mets. You've got the Guardians. I mean, they used to be the Indians. They're, certainly a team that's been around a while. So you've got a number of teams that most fans are familiar with. You either love them or hate them. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the World Series plays out and who gets in there. No question. I mean, it's weird to be not around this long into the postseason, Steve. Usually, we're still thinking about it. I mean, my Facebook, I'm looking at my Facebook memories every day, and I'm seeing, posts from last year, Robert, and the year before, where I'm either, posting or you're posting, hey, join us for our Astros ALCS Game 2 post-game show, or our Astros World Series Game 6 post-game show, or whatever. Those memories are popping up, and I'm sitting there going, man, we're not going to be able to say that this year. It's too bad. Well, such a run. It's incredible. It's incredible that we've just been going through all of this. And I just want to switch gears for a second and acknowledge a couple of birthdays this week. We talked earlier about the Texans' birthdays, but on Sunday, a good friend of the show and one of the guys who made me fall in love with Houston sports radio, Jerry Trupiano, he celebrates a birthday. He called the Astros, Rockets, and Oilers games on the radio. And one guy that he covered was another Jerry Glanville, the Oilers' old coach, who turned 83 yesterday on Monday. And in this HST classic clip, I asked Trupiano about his days with Glanville, and boy, we got some stories.
What was Jerry like? That had to be quite interesting.
How much time do you have? and
are we going to violate it? Right?
Yeah, there was one night he was very superstitious. Even in the preseason, if the ball club had won the previous game, we would do the pregame interview. If it'd be on the field and they won, we do it on the field the next week. If it was in the dressing room and they won, it would be in the dressing room. So we're playing the Dallas Cowboys in that annual preseason game, right? So I'm looking for Glanville to do the pregame interview before I go up to the booth to call the game, and I'm looking all over for him. And they say, well, Jerry's sick. He wants you to come into the coach's dressing room. So I go into the coach's dressing room, and all the lights are off. He is laying on the floor under about 3 blankets, and he wants me to kneel down as we do this interview because he's so sick. So we do the interview, and then like James Brown in the old routine where he'd throw off the cloak he was wearing and then come back to the stage and continue the song, Glanville throws off the 3 blankets and then goes out to coach. It was, to me, a little bit of drama. Then, in the regular season, playing the Cleveland Browns at Old Municipal Stadium. Now, I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, okay? We're coming out of the dressing room, and we're going to do the interview on the field in the end zone because they had won the previous week, and we did the interview on the field in the end zone. So now we're walking out down steps and back up the dugout steps to go out on the field. It finally comes to my attention that there's a dozen police officers following us. And now we're in the end zone in the middle of a circle of 12 policemen. And I said, Jerry, what's going on here? He says, well, there's a death threat against me. He shows me a bulletproof vest he's wearing. And I'm supposed to do this pregame interview with his Yahoo as we're surrounded by a dozen police officers. He would go around and leave tickets in New York for the Phantom of the Opera or tickets for Elvis when we played a preseason game in Memphis. He was a piece of work.
I had to laugh, Stephen, because he called him a Yahoo. And
He sure did.
That's something that you can do when you're pretty much retired from the game. So thanks Trupiano for that stuff. That was great.
Man, their first names may be Jerry, but boy, you talk about two totally different personalities, Jerry Trupiano and Jerry Glanville, having birthdays on the same day. That's pretty remarkable in itself. Yeah, Glanville was a character. I mean, we heard a lot of those stories. And, as far as Jerry Trupiano, I mean, you talk about him having you fall in love with sports, Robert. It was exactly the same for me. And yes, he did call Astros, Oilers, games. And he's the one who also got me interested in hockey, because he covered the Houston Aeros of the World Hockey Association when they were around in the 70s, when Gordie Howe and his two sons were playing. So, man, you talk about an icon of Houston sportscasting. Jerry Trupiano is the guy. It's amazing how many years have gone by that you look back and just remember all those games he called. And then the stories of Glanville. I mean, he certainly has a lot of stories stored up in all those years, doesn't he?
Boy, Jerry Glanville was a lot about Jerry Glanville, and that's what I don't really miss about him. But it was entertaining, and it's still amazing to me that he's still going. He's still coaching, defensive coordinator at Northwestern Oklahoma State University as we speak at 83.
Wow. Yeah, that is pretty remarkable. And you wonder, how he can relate to some of the young kids of today. And is he still doing some of those antics that he did even back then? Is he too old to do some of those things? My guess is probably not.
One last thing that we got on this one, Houston Cougar football had a bye week, but Stephen, how cool is it to see the preseason basketballs come out every single year with the Cougs now in the top 5 or 10? The AP poll has them at number 4.
Man, that is wonderful. That just means Cougar basketball is right around the corner. Really excited to hear about that. And, every year, I mean, how can you not vote them high when you've got a Kelvin Sampson team out there? As long as he's coaching the team, I just have confidence that the Cougars are going to do well. And he knows how to replenish a roster no matter how many players you lose. I just interviewed a hockey coach who was the Kelly Cup champions in the ECHL, and that's a league, it's a developmental league. Players move around all the time. And yet this guy's won 3 championships in a row. Well, Kelvin Sampson, he may not have won a bunch of national championships in a row. But listen, no matter how many players he loses every year, he's able to come up with players to replace them and keep his team in the top echelon of the country and in the conversation, at least, for a national title.
One of his players broke a nose in practice in a rebound drill. And I just feel like you don't come to U of H and get coached by Kelvin Sampson if you're not willing to break your nose.
I didn't even see that. Do you know which player that was?
It wasn't one of the main guys. I'm blanking on which one. I'll pull it up while you're talking about it. But it's not a name guy. I think this guy is more of a back of the bench.
Probably one of the walk-ons or something. But
Milos Uzan. I don't know. I don't know where he might be. I forget. He might be the guy that is replacing Jamal Shedd, but he's going to be fine.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, those practices are intense. I mean, nobody ever said Kelvin Sampson was a pansy when it came to practices. So, if you're going to go to U of H, you better be prepared to work your butt off, and you better be prepared to pay for the consequences if you don't, or if you don't do something right. Because Kelvin Sampson, and you talk about a disciplined guy, he knows how to get his players in shape for a season.
Yeah, no, he runs those guys. I've been to practice there, and it's not for the faint of heart. I get nervous just watching, him yelling at guys and the intensity.
Oh, and the games too. I get nervous in the games watching him sometimes on the sidelines.
Yeah, he should be fine. He went to surgery, but they're going to have I think he's going to be wearing a mask or something like that. He's a transfer out of OU. I think they're expecting some good things from him.
I've heard the name. I know the name now that you say it. Yeah.
That's all from the Cougars for this week. But even in the Ken Palm poll, I noticed they were number 1. Which is, the Ken Palm is more analytically based, which I have more value in, although the NCAA tournament doesn't seem to have value in because they're always right near the top and they should be getting number 1 seeds or high number 1 seeds every year when the season's over. And they just don't seem to have much respect for that particular Ken Palm deal, even though a lot of people think it's a lot more accurate.
Yeah, I think it is too. But yeah, you see them do a number 2 and number 3 seeds. So yeah, it'll be interesting, be getting going in November and some of the non-conference games, but once you get into Big 12 play, that's where you're really going to earn your bread and butter. So yeah, really excited because the Rockets are starting up in a week and the Cougars will be starting here in a couple, 3 weeks.
Got a Packers insider tomorrow. He has been a Packers broadcaster as well as covering the Packers for 15 years, an old friend of mine, an old Houstonian and television in this area as well, former guest on the show. So I'm looking forward to talking to him. And then, of course, always looking forward to hear from you guys in the comments. Reminder, get in the comments. We want you on our live Sunday post-game show. Me and Tom can't wait. Packers, Texans should be fun. One of the better matchups of the season. Jordan Love versus CJ Stroud. Thanks so much, Stephen.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.